This is a special video for a grade 11 student who is doing the PAT, or the Practical Assessment Task for IT, Information Technology, for 2024. We're going to talk about the PAT document that's just recently been released and what are the things that you need to do in order to complete your PAT. And I'm going to give some tips as well as the topic so that we can discuss that as well. So please take note of this video, take note of all the resources that we mentioned, and together we can hopefully create a PAT that gets you as many marks as possible. So let's talk about the document. So this is the document. I'll put a link where you can download it in the description. So we're looking at the grade 11 IT PAT for 2024. So let's go through the details here. First of all, what is the PAT? The PAT is a way to show off all the skills you've learned in IT. So everything you've learned in grade 10 and 11, you're going to combine as a way of showing off those skills that you've learned in IT. So they talk about the details. There are 10 tasks that are divided, and this year they divided up into 3 phases. The first phase is going to be a document that you create, which has all your planning, what are the requirements, what is it that you're going to be doing. So that's going to be a document that tells you everything you've done. Your phase 2 is going to be your actual program that you develop based on that planning from phase 1. And then phase 3 is going to be your interview, but then there's some extra documentation that you might want to include in phase 3. So they give you specifications of when you must complete the different tasks. So they say task 1 to 5, which is the phase 1, must be done before the end of term 3. And then your rest of your PAT must be done before you start your exams in term 4. But discuss with your teacher about the deadline so that you know exactly when you must submit what. So let's go look at the mark allocation. So basically you can see here that phase 1, that document counts 64 marks. And then the phase 2, the actual programming, is 70 marks. And then the documentation at the end interview is about 60. So overall it's about 150. So I really want you to put a lot of emphasis on that phase 1 to make sure that you get those 64 marks. And take note that to get those 70 marks, this is going to take a long time. Coding and creating your program takes a long time to do. So make sure that you give yourself enough time to get all of those 70 marks. Look how much coding is worth. 50 of that 70 is going to be just the coding part. So make sure that you get all those marks. And we are using this PAT to practice for grade 12. The PAT counts 25% of your end of year mark, which is almost the same, which is the same value as one of your final exams. So it's really important to put a lot of emphasis on the PAT and make sure that you get those marks. It's like having a third exam where you've got technically the memo because you've got the rubric. So you know exactly how to get all the marks. So make sure that you do as well as you can. It's very possible, and I've seen lots of students do that. Students that only get 50 or 60% for RT end up getting 80% or 90% for the PAT because it's just about getting the marks. So I want you to use this grade 11 PAT as a way to start setting the tone for what you are going to do next year. Not only is this going to give you a bit of an insight as to what to expect for next year's PAT, but you are going to start creating good habits now. If you start creating bad habits in grade 11 while not completing certain parts or ignoring the advice you get from me or your teachers, then you're going to carry those bad habits into grade 12 and it's going to negatively affect your mark. Start now by getting used to meeting deadlines, following advice, making sure that you get all the marks so that you can carry that momentum with you into grade 12. So let's go have a look at the topic. The topic for the grade 11s for 2024 is healthy living. So we're dealing in a program to do with healthy living. They give you a couple of scenarios that you can look at. For example, an exercise program, diet program, selling healthy products, a program with people with medical conditions, an obesity prevention program, living loyalty program, personal health data manager, recipes for healthy dishes. So they give you quite a range of ideas. You're not restricted to those ideas as long as it sort of falls in the healthy living sphere. So they give you some resources to go look at. They get some nice examples over there. They talk about the different spheres over here of healthy living. They're giving you some nice options to think about. Now, once you have an idea of which sphere you are going to be doing your program on, what type of program you're going to do, the next best piece of advice I can give you is to go and look at similar programs. Now, you can look at other programs that currently exist. You can go look at websites that do similar things. You can go look at apps on your phone that are related to that particular sphere or topic that you are focusing on. The reason why I say you must go look at other programs is because you will get ideas from those programs. Go look at those programs and look at what it is that you like about the program, what it is you don't like, and take those elements of what you like and what you can improve on so that you can bring them into your program. That's going to give you a lot of ideas of how the program should work. So looking at other programs that currently exist that are similar is really going to help you. You're going to have to do some sort of research. Please make sure that you do your own work and that if you get help that you're referencing where that help's coming from, and you are going to sign a little document at the end to say, yes, this is my work. So make sure that you are doing everything yourself. So the PAT requirements, what is it that we need? We need a project that is going to connect to a database. This is going to be the main difference between this year's PAT and your grade 10 PAT, is that you now have a lot of things interacting with the database. And that's very important. Most of the marks relate to the database. So please make sure that you don't leave the database part out. It covers majority of the marks. And your database must have at least 2 tables with lots of data in, and you must have suitable fields. And we are going to interact with that database via the program. You're going to have a graphical user interface. You need at least 2 screens or forms that you interact between. This program is going to interact with the database. We're going to have nice data structures, and we're going to make sure that it follows human-computer interaction principles. In other words, good design. The buttons are all laid out nicely. They're all the same size. They're all in the right places, the right color schemes, that type of thing. You need to have a text file that you either get information from or that you use to output information. You need to have an array. I strongly recommend that you use a parallel array, and you need to use user-defined functions. That's going to be your functions and procedures. So you need to specify the ones that you've made yourself. And the other, take note of the quality of the programming code. So it's not just that the code works, that you actually have good, efficient code and it meets the requirements in the best possible way. We're going to go start off with the different instructions. They talk about the research. There's some discussions that you can have for task 0. It doesn't have any marks, but you're just talking about the topics and thinking about what it is that you want to do. You can maybe get, your teacher might maybe do this as a class discussion. And then we talk about the phase 1, which is task 1 to 5. Now here's your next tip. I have a PAT guide, which I give to my matrics, and you can download that PAT guide at tinyurl.com/MrLong-PAT-Guide-IT. That document is going to have links to videos, all the things that you're going to need. Now, some of those concepts are going to be related towards grade 12 because that is the PAT guide for grade 12. So I'm going to, in this video, talk about what's different between the grade 12 PAT and the grade 11 PAT. So there are going to be parts that are in the grade 11 that's not in the grade 12, which we'll highlight. And there are going to be parts that you don't have to do in your grade 11 PAT that are in the grade 12. So make sure that you know the difference between the two. But there are tons of videos there to help you with examples of how to go through the different parts of the PAT. Before we even get to this, let's go look at our folder structure. So you're going to have a folder called your surname name. You're going to have maybe a grade 11 IT PAT. You're going to ask your teacher how you must name your folder for your PAT. And in your folder, you're going to have your 3 phases. Okay, so that's going to be your document will be in there, your programming code will be in there, your help files will be in that. Maybe even put your declaration of authenticity in there as well. Here is another tip. Once you've got your folder structure, you're going to start using this. You're going to also create a backup folder, not inside there, but outside your PAT folder. And every time you work on your PAT for a couple of days, you're going to copy your PAT folder, copy, and then you're going to go into your backup folder, and then you're going to paste it over here. And then you're going to rename that folder as the current date. So 2024, use dashes, not slashes, because you can't have a slash in a folder name, /05-05. That's my first backup. Then we're going to go back over here and continue working in the main PAT folder. And then after a couple of more days, we're going to make a copy. We're going to go back to the backup folder, and we're going to paste our PAT folder and rename it as the new date, which will be 2024-05. Maybe this is the 12th. And so over time, you're going to have created a whole bunch of folders which are specified by date. The reason for this is that if something goes wrong, and often something does go wrong, and you need to go back to a previous version of the PAT, you will have a collection of dates of when you can go back, maybe a couple of days, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and you can get an older version of your PAT, maybe just the document, or maybe it's just a particular part of the file. But it's very important. There are numerous times when I have students who have not made backups, and then something goes wrong, and then they say, "Sir, something's wrong." And I'll say, "Okay, well, then you have to just go get a previous backup," and they say, "I don't have a backup," and then they have to restart the whole thing. So to save you a lot of time, make sure that you are doing these backups. The other thing that's very important about this is it actually shows you your progress over time, how I've done this part and this part and this part. So you can see a nice set of progress for your PAT. So create those backups so that if something goes wrong, you can go back and correct something. In this phase 1 folder, I've got a Word document which looks like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this PDF version of this that you can download. I'll put a link in the description, and it's basically a guide to the phase 1, which is task 1 to 5. And this is specifically for the grade 11. So it talks about creating your folders. It talks about that backup that we just mentioned, and it shows you the steps in order to create your own version of this type of document. So it says create a Word document in your phase 1 folder, follow the steps. So I've got a link. There's the QR code. There's a link to my phase 1 videos. Now again, that's for the matric, and majority of it is the same. There are a couple of things that are slightly different and some things that you can skip, but you can pretty much, for majority of the phase 1, follow those videos, and it'll tell you exactly what you need to do. So it tells you about inserting the cover page. It tells you about how to do these references. You can see the headings that you need to put in. You can put those headings in advance, and it tells you how to make those particular headings. So we're going to go there. And right before you submit, they just say you must update this so that the page numbers get updated. And they talk there about the heading styles and that. So over here, your task definition, which is task 1A, which is this over here. You need to write a brief description highlighting what the task is, what is your solution to solve, and provide a brief description. I've got the 4 points that you need to have in your task definition. If you watch the video, it's sometimes referred to as the scenario and scope. You can go and make sure that you get all of those aspects done. So go watch the video. It'll tell you exactly what to do. Now, this is the part that is slightly different for the grade 11s, and that's task B. So they talk about user stories. Now, we don't do user stories in grade 12. We do a requirements table. So what they're asking for the user stories, they're asking you to create a user story that looks like this. It's that's the noun, I want to, and that's what the action is, what you want it to do, and this is why you want to do it. You can create 2 user stories because you're going to have at least 2 different users. They give you some examples of potential nouns, a learner, a register, a fitness program, and then the verbs of what you want it to do. I want to indicate the learner's action and so on, and then why you want it to happen. So you can create at least 2 user stories, one for each type of user that's using your program. And then for each of those user stories, you're going to write an acceptance test. This is going to tell you how we know that the goal of the program has been met. And so, for example, for this particular user story, a learner wants to register for a fitness program so they can improve their health. This is how we will accept that it is correct, that the learner can register, they can see their fitness and well-being programs progress, and they can improve their fitness. So that's how we know we can accept. Now, you need a total of 5 acceptance tests for the 2 user stories. So you might have 3 for the one and 2 for the other. You might have more, but as long as you've got at least 5 acceptance tests for the 2 user stories. So in this document that you can download, you can see that I've got my user stories. I've given an example. I'll give an example of the acceptance test. Now in Matric, we use this type of structure. We have a role and activity. You could do something similar to the user stories to this. And in my video for Matrix, we talk about this, where we talk about what is the role of this general user and what's the role of that administrator. I don't know what your 2 users are going to be here. I've used just the example of a general administrator. You might have 2 other types of users. You can specify what the role is of user 1 and what the role is of user 2. What are the activities that they are going to do? And in Matric, we specify the limitations of what they can't do. They also mentioned that instead of user stories, you could do a table that like this, where you say, this is the user, this is the role of the user, and these are the activities that they can do. So it's almost like that is the user, that is the role, these are the activities. But then you must have the acceptance tests for your 2 users. So this part is the part that's different, and that's not in the video. But if you read the PAT document, they give you some examples, and you can probably do that quite easy from there. Task 2 is your data dictionary. I've got one over here. Now this part is also new for grade 11. This is not in the grade 12 videos, but I've made a structure just to help you and guide you. Yeah, you got to specify your variables and components, and they want you to plan them in advance before the actual program starts. And it's about your variable types and your component types, which are local and global variables, and your naming conventions. And to make it easier, I've created this table structure for you. You don't have to do it that way, but I think this will help you with getting the marks, where you're going to specify what the variable's used for, what the data type of the variable is, what's the name of your variable, and if it's global or local. So I'll give you an example. So maybe for the username that's logged on, you're going to make it a string. The variable is going to be called username. It's going to be a global variable because we need to use it amongst all the buttons to check who's logged on. And then we've got an age and so on. So you can fill this in as you find that you need to use variables. You can fill that in quite nicely. And you should have a variety of data types and a variety of global and local variables to make sure that you get all the marks. When it comes to the components, especially for inputs and outputs, you specify what the component is, what the name of the component is, and what its function is. What they're looking for here is that the naming convention is correct, that you're using a good type of prefixes for your components as well as for your variable names, and that you've got a variety of component types. So this part is new. However, when you get to text files, this is similar to Matric. I even have videos in the PAT guide that will give you some examples of how you could use text files if you don't know where to put a text file. But you need to find a place where you are either getting information from a text file or you are creating a text file. Take note, with these data structures, you are specifying a paragraph of how the text file is being used and then an example of that text file. Don't just give an example. You need to justify why you are needing to use text files. And then the same for arrays. Why is it that you need to use an array? And then give an example of what that array is going to be. I would prefer to use a parallel array because it gives you a lot more variety of what you can do. And so you can see they talk about arrays, text files. They talk about user-defined methods. That is your own functions and procedures. This is also new for grade 11. So what I've done is I've added this part here where you can create a table that looks like this. You mention if it's a function or procedure under method type, what is the name. If it requires any parameters, you can actually put multiple parameters over here if you want and specify them all like that. And what is the role of this method. Then they talk about other data structures. I haven't put a heading for that, but if you've got other data structures, you can mention that over there. Then task 3 is the database design. So I've created a nice little table over here. Very important. The part that a lot of students leave out is they forget about the role of the database. It's very nice to have a database, but you need to explain why you are using a database. You need to mention what the database is storing and all the transactions. So when the user logs on, we're going to search the user table to find the username and password and see that they are the correct user. You are mentioning all the different transactions that are happening. When the user registers, we add the user's details to the user table. So that way we are justifying the need for a database. And then here they said you need 2 tables. You specify the table name. Make sure that your table names start with TBL. Give all the different field names, what data type that field is. So it could be a text, it could be an integer, whatever the type is in the database. And we need to specify the size of that particular field, especially if it is a text field. You can't have text fields that are just 255. Limit the size of those text fields. So we only need 25 characters for the username. If it's other fields like integers or booleans and that, you might want to mention the format, or you might say not applicable. Maybe it's a date field and you want to say it's a long date or a medium date. The most important thing is that the text fields, you specify the max size. And then one of the fields must be a primary key. So you can indicate that on the side, either over there or next to the field name, put the letters PK so that we know that that is the primary key. So make sure that you do that for both of your tables. And that way we can get all those marks. Then it's going to task 4. This has got quite a bit there. We've got the graphical design and the flow between the screens. So I've got a video for that. So first of all, it's your screen design. Put in all your screens. You can either do them on paper or use shapes over here to indicate where the buttons are on that. I think the best way, because it saves time, is to actually design your screens in Delphi, because then you're technically creating your phase 2 part ahead of time, creating the screens, and then you can just take screenshots of them and put them over here. And that way, when you get to the coding part, your screen design's already done. So put in your screens over here. Remember, you need at least 2 different screens, and then you need to create a flow diagram or navigation structure to show how the screens work. You're going to have 2 users. You can say, well, user 1 goes to this screen and then they go to this screen. You can have like arrows that go back and forth between them. You might have administrator in a different color. Maybe they also go to screen 1, but then they jump to screen 3. You create that particular diagram. I have a video which shows you examples of that as well. For grade 12, it's exactly the same as grade 12, so make sure that you do that. The majority of the marks come from this RPO table. So I have a video that goes in depth about every aspect of the RPO table. But just to give you an introduction to it, you're going to fill out this particular table. You're going to fill out all the input details. There's your validation, indicating the different types of validation and the error messages, the processing that needs to be done, and then the output that needs to be done. You need to do that for 2 screens. So when they say at least 8 processes, that means over the 2 screens. So that means you could have 5 over here and 3 for the second screen, but as long as they're 8 in total. When they talk about 4 data types that are validated, there could be 2 in this one and 2 in the other, or 3 in this one and 2 in the other one, as long as there are at least 4 in total. So the RPO table is majority of the marks, and that's why that video that I've got on the RPO is important. Remember, you can go and get the videos over there by following that QR code or by clicking on the link in the PAT guide, which, as I said, you can download from tinyurl.com/MrLongPatGuideIT. Then that is your phase 1. There's some details about what you must do before submitting. And this is my next tip, is that go through the rubric. Whenever you have a phase, go through the rubric first to mark it yourself and identify if you are maybe missing something. Because if you're missing something, you've got time then to go back and put it in before you officially submit it. So make sure that you mark it yourself. So let's talk about that rubric quickly, which is right over here. So here we've got the rubric. Go through it. Have I got that? Have I got that? Have I got that? Have I got that? Yes. All 4 aspects covered. You get all 4 marks. And this is why I want to emphasize that you must go through the rubric, because you can then see if you got anything missing. You can see how easy it is to get as many marks as possible. Even if you are someone who gets 50% for IT, you can get a really good mark for your PAT, because this is just about ticking the blocks. Have you clearly described your task? Then you're going to get that mark. Have you identified what the need for the task? Have you got a solution? Have you talked about the scope? If you cover all of those clearly, you're going to get all 4 marks. The user stories, have you got at least 2? Yes, you're going to get all of those marks. Have you got at least 5? If you only got 4, then you're only going to get those marks. But if you cover all the things that they need, you're going to get all the marks. You can see that it's divided into the different tasks. There's the data dictionary. There is the data structures. Going down to the database, you can see the role of the database. Don't forget to discuss how the database is being used. Have you used good field sizes? Have you got at least 2 tables? Make sure that you've got everything ticked off. The navigation structure, there is 4 marks. And then as you can see, the RPO table, look at this, 4 marks, 4 marks, 4 marks. That's already 12, plus another 4, plus another 4. This is 20 marks for just the RPO. That's the biggest task of all the tasks for the phase 1. So make sure that you get all the marks for the phase 1. So you can download this document from the link in the description to help you set up your phase 1 document, and you're going to put that into your phase 1. You're probably also going to create a database when you are doing the phase 1, and I would put the database in the phase 1 as well, because if something goes wrong with your database in phase 2, maybe you accidentally delete stuff and you want to get it back original, then at least you've got a copy of it in the phase 1 folder. So in your phase 2 folder, you're going to then put your actual code. So that's task 6 onwards, task 6 to 9. You're going to develop your graphical user interface, design good screens. My advice here with designing the screens, while you're designing them, make sure that you are renaming your components straight away. It's very difficult to come back afterwards and start renaming components, especially after you've written code. Can cause hassles later on. So make sure when you're designing that every single component, every label, every comment box, every edit box has a name which follows the prefix followed by the useful name for what it is. So make sure that you follow those design criteria. Make sure that you get color scheme nice, pick a couple of colors and use that throughout your program. Make sure your buttons are all the same size, the fonts are all the same size, that they are well laid out and positioned, that they follow a good structure, and get those ideas from those other programs that you looked at to get ideas of what the layout should look like. That is your design. Then you're going to create your database and connect it to your application. So they told you about what the prefix should be, designing good field sizes, and so on, putting some data in there. I've got a video that explains how to get data into your database. You can use an AI like ChatGPT to generate values for your database, or you can use certain websites, and then you need to make sure that your database connects correctly to your program. Now, here is my pack guide for grade 12s, but I want to just highlight something for you quickly. I want you to scroll all the way down to the setup. This is the part I want to specify. You're going to create a database and you want to connect it. Now, connecting it using normal components where you just drag them on is the way you've probably been taught. But I really want to recommend that you connect to your database using code. So you're going to dynamically connect to your database. It makes your life a lot easier, especially when you're moving your pat folders around and you need the connection to still work. This is a very important video. Not only do you get the marks for having a database connection, but you're also getting the marks for dynamic objects. So this video is a very important video, and this is what I would recommend you use when you are connecting your database. Follow it step by step so that you can get your database connected dynamically. You do your coding, make sure that you include your text files, your arrays, your user-defined methods. In the Pat Guide, I've got lots of examples of things that you can do, like to do a login screen, administrative features. So there are lots of examples here. They don't tell you exactly how to do your particular Pat, but they give you examples of things that you can then implement in your own way and modify for your particular program. Afterwards, you're going to do some sort of testing and data validation. In other words, we want to make sure that your program's working. In a separate document, I'm not going to include it in the phase 1 document, I would create a table like that where you go through different scenarios and you give it correct data and what the result is and incorrect data. Your teacher might do this informally when they do the interview, so double check with them, but I would maybe have a document that you can then go say, when I logged on, I gave a username and a password, and the username and password was correct, the expected result was a success, and it took me to the main profile page. When the input was incorrect, when the username was wrong or the password was wrong, then a message popped up said invalid username or password. Create this type of document with a couple of tests of scenarios to make sure that you've tested values, especially those that are being input. So that's your task 9. So speak to your teacher exactly about what they expect you to do for your task 9. Task 10, there's going to be an interview, but before we get to the interview, there's the documentation. Now there's 2 types of documentation. There's a documentation for the developers. So for example, if you are working in a company, you're probably working with other developers, so you want them to know what your code is doing. For this, you just write comments, and make sure you write tons of comments in the code explaining every part of the pat. Rather have too many comments or too little, and in your code, I must be able to see lots of green, because there's so many comments in your code. And then your project notes. This is going to be like your help file for the person that's using it. Now, there are lots of ways that you can do this. You could do this either as a document that the user can then read through, like a help file, you could maybe make a video where you go through the program and then the user can click on different videos for them to explain how the program works. Or you could create a website. Maybe you know HTML and you can create some website that explains how the program works when they click on different links. Or you could create text files which have the details of how the program works. What's nice about the video, the text file, and the web page option is that you could technically include that in the program. So when the user clicks on a particular button, then a particular help advice comes up. So you can include that as part of your help. Again, if you go to my Pat Guide, I give you a whole video on project notes of what you should do for your project notes. So that can help you either with a text file or a web page or a video. So go look at that video. So that is what I would include in your phase 3 folder. And then you're going to be interviewed by your teacher. Your teacher will give you more details about what the interview will entail, but there's some guidelines. So they're going to be basically asking you to demonstrate your program and ask you information about your code. So that's why it's important that you write comments in your code so that you can know what your code is doing when they get asked. Also, put in the comments any references to if you got that code from somewhere else. You copied a particular algorithm from somewhere. You can't just copy algorithms for the entire Pat, but if there is a particular algorithm that you found online, you can reference it, but reference where you got it so that you're not claiming it as your own, and that will help you in the interview process to be able to explain how that code works. And that's why it's also important why you are doing the code yourself and not using other people to do it for you or other IRs to do your code for you, because if you do and you don't understand that code, guess what? You're going to come short when the teacher interviews you and you can't explain what that code's doing, especially if that code looks very different to what you've been taught in class. Because then it's going to be very obvious that that's not your code that you created. And then at the end, you've got to hand in a declaration of authenticity and of the help that you received. I would include those documents, if they are digital, in your phase 3 folder. And they're right at the end of the Pat document. And you fill in where you got help from, and then you fill in like, this is my own work. I did the work myself. At the end of my Pat Guide, I've got links to documents that you can download that are similar to this that you can edit. And then you can put that into your phase 3 folder and just make sure that you sign it and so on. Sign it and fill in the details accordingly. So that's basically everything. Let's just go look at the rubric quickly for phase 2. So again, you can see where all the marks are coming from. Make sure that you mark your phase 2 before you submit it, making sure that you've got all of those aspects. Make sure that you've got your database connected nicely, that it meets all those criteria. And then task 8, where you're going to get a lot of the marks. Make sure that your variable types are correct, that you're using local and global variables, that your naming conventions are good. There's your arrays and text files and functions and procedures. You see, if you don't have them, you're going to lose all those marks. Make sure that you've got them. Make sure you're getting input from variety of options. There they can talk about, there's the process. Is it correct? Is it efficient? There they talk about a dynamic component. If you've done a database connection dynamically, then you're going to get a lot of the marks here. And here particularly is where you get a lot of marks. Make sure with your database manipulation that you're doing all of those things, that you insert a record, that you delete a record, that you edit a record, that you validate the fields before you insert them. So make sure that you've got all of those, because there's a lot of marks there for the Pat. So that is the discussion about the grade 11 Pat. So the first 2 things that I would suggest that you do is, number 1, that you think about your topic. Once you know what topic you want in the health industry, that you go look at examples of programs that are similar to that, so you can get ideas of what you want your program to look like and what you want your program to do. Obviously, understanding that you need to scope it to a simple little program that a grade 11 can do. You're just making a simple program for your Pat. You can always add more features later, but make it very simple and easy in the beginning. So that's number 1. And number 2 is you need to download my Pat Guide, which I said you can download from tinyurl.com/MrLongPatGuideRT. This is the grade 12 one, so you're going to need it for next year anyway. But the videos here are going to be very beneficial for you to see examples and especially to see how to do the phase 1. The one little note, in grade 12, we do what's called an object. And you haven't done that yet because you only do that in Matric. And some of you probably haven't started SQL. So when you ever see a reference to SQL or an object in this Pat Guide, you can skip that because that's mainly for grade 12. So there we go. You've got the information you need. Hopefully it's enough that you can get started with your Pat. Make sure that you are following all the tips I give you. Make sure you speak to your teacher to make sure that you're meeting their requirements. And good luck. And I hope your Pat comes out the way you want it. Good luck, grade 11s. If we post more tips, you don't want to miss them, so make sure you click on that subscribe button. We also give some tips on our TikTok channel at Mr. Long Education, so subscribe to there as well. And remember, don't do it the long way, do it the Mr. Long way.